My father raised his glass and said, "Some children make you proud. Others just waste space." I was holding my wine glass mid-air. The entire table went silent. He wasn't even looking at me when he said it. "I'm Emma. I'm 26 years old. I work as a licensed pediatric nurse at St. Michael's Children's Hospital, and I've been on the night shift for 3 years now. I make $58,000 a year. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city. I pay my own rent. I bought my own car. I built my life from scratch without anyone's help. My family looks perfect on the outside. My parents live in a beautiful house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage and a backyard that looks like it belongs in a magazine. My brother is 2 years older than me. He's always been the golden one, not because he earned it, just because that's how it's always been. I thought this dinner would be different. My mom had texted me 2 weeks earlier asking if we could all get together. She used the words, "family reconciliation dinner." I actually believed her. I thought maybe they'd finally noticed I existed. I thought maybe they wanted to fix things. I should have known better. If you've ever been pushed aside by family when it mattered most, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know I'm not alone in this. I was 10 years old the first time I realized my parents weren't going to show up for me. It was the regional science fair. I'd spent 3 months building a model of the solar system that actually rotated. I'd wired the whole thing myself. I was so proud of it. The judges gave me first place. They handed me a blue ribbon and a certificate. I stood on that stage scanning the audience for my parents. They weren't there. My brother had a soccer tournament the same day. He placed third. My parents went to his game instead. When I got home that night, my dad was grilling burgers in the backyard. My mom was setting the table. My brother was showing them his bronze medal. I walked in holding my blue ribbon. My mom glanced at it and said, "Oh, that's nice, sweetie. Go wash your hands for dinner." That was it. No celebration. No questions about my project. No photos. Nothing. My brother got a cake that night because he worked so hard. I ate my burger in silence and went to my room. I remember lying in bed that night thinking maybe I hadn't done enough. Maybe if I'd won something bigger, they would have cared. It happened again and again. School concerts where they arrived late or didn't come at all. Award ceremonies they forgot about. Birthday parties where they seemed distracted. I learned not to tell them when I accomplished something because their indifference hurt worse than their absence. My grandmother noticed. She was my dad's mom. She'd ask me about school and actually listen when I answered. She came to my high school graduation when my parents almost skipped it for my brother's work dinner. She was the one, person who made me feel like I mattered. She passed away when I was 22. I lost the only person who ever really saw me. I thought things would change when I grew up. I thought maybe once I proved I could take care of myself, they'd respect me. 3 months ago, I completed a specialized trauma care certification. It's intense. It's a 6-month program on top of regular work. I studied every morning before my shifts. I passed the final exam with a 96%. The hospital held a small graduation ceremony for the nurses who completed it. There were only 8 of us. I invited my parents. I sent them the date and time. I even offered to buy them lunch afterward. My mom texted me the morning of the ceremony. "Can't make it today. Your brother has a work dinner and we promised we'd be there. Congrats, though." My brother's work dinner, not even his dinner. He was attending a dinner hosted by his company. He's a junior analyst at a mid-sized firm. He didn't even need them there. But they went anyway. I sat in that ceremony alone. Again. I watched the other nurses hug their families afterward. I drove myself home. I cried in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for 20 minutes before I could go inside. But I told myself maybe they just didn't understand how important it was. Maybe they didn't realize. Maybe the family dinner my mom planned would be a chance to reconnect. I actually convinced myself that. Then came the dinner, the family reconciliation dinner. My mom had set the table with her nice dishes. She'd made roast chicken and mashed potatoes. My brother showed up late wearing a suit because he'd just come from work. My dad was already 2 glasses of wine in when I arrived. Everything felt normal at first. We made small talk. My mom asked about my shifts. I started to tell her about a patient I'd helped, and my dad interrupted to ask my brother about his promotion. Wait, promotion? My brother had just been promoted to senior analyst. I didn't even know he was up for it. No one had mentioned it to me. My dad stood up. He raised his glass. He started talking about how proud he was, how my brother had worked so hard, how he was climbing the corporate ladder, how he was going to do great things. Then my dad turned to me. He looked right at me, and he said, "Some children make you proud. Others just waste space. But that's okay. Nursing is fine for people without ambition." I felt my entire body freeze. My wine glass was halfway to my mouth. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mom looked down at her plate. My brother shifted uncomfortably but didn't say anything. No one corrected him. No one defended me. My dad sat back down and kept eating like he hadn't just destroyed me in front of everyone. I put my glass down. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I said I wasn't feeling well and I needed to leave. My mom looked annoyed. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just sighed. I grabbed my purse and walked out. I drove home in complete silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat with the realization that my father thought I was a waste of space, and no one had disagreed with him. But what I discovered next changed everything. I got home and my mom texted me, "You really embarrassed your father tonight. You could have stayed. You're being too sensitive." I read that message 5 times. I'd embarrassed him, not the other way around. I didn't respond. I turned my phone off and went to bed. I called in sick to work the next night. I couldn't face anyone. My brother didn't text. He didn't call. He didn't defend me at that dinner, and he didn't reach out after. The next week, I ran into my aunt at the grocery store. She's my mom's sister. She asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. She looked uncomfortable. Then she said, "Your mom told me you had to leave the dinner early because you weren't feeling well. That's too bad. It sounded like a nice evening." I stared at her. That's what my mom had told people, that I wasn't feeling well. Not that my dad had publicly humiliated me, just that I'd been sick. My aunt kept talking. She said, "Your mom mentioned you've been really busy with work. She said that's why you haven't been coming to family events." I hadn't been invited to any family events. I stood there in the middle of the grocery store holding a carton of eggs and realized my family was rewriting the narrative. They were making me the problem, the distant one, the too busy one, the overly sensitive one. They were protecting their image, and I was the collateral damage. Maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe this was just who they are. 2 weeks after the dinner, I was cleaning out my closet. I'd been putting off organizing my old files for months. I found a box of documents from when I'd turned 18, tax forms, bank statements, old mail, and then I found something I didn't recognize, a credit card statement, in my name, from 8 years ago. I sat on my bedroom floor and opened it. There was an $8,000 balance. I'd never opened this card. I'd never used it. I pulled out my laptop and checked my credit report. The account was still listed. It had been opened when I was 18. My parents' address was on file. The balance had been paid off 4 years ago, but not before it had tanked my credit score. I called the credit card company. The representative told me the card had been opened with my social security number. My parents had signed me up for it. They'd told me at the time it was to build my credit. They'd said they'd manage it and pay it off. I'd trusted them, but they hadn't paid it. Not for years. It had gone to collections. It had destroyed my credit. And then, finally, they'd paid it off when I was 22, right around the time I was trying to buy my first car. I'd been denied for an auto loan. The bank had told me my credit wasn't good enough. I'd been so confused. I'd never missed a payment on anything. I didn't understand. Now I understood. My parents had ruined my credit and never told me. I kept digging. I found old emails. I found records. And then I found something else. My brother had the same card, same company, same setup, except his had been paid off immediately. He'd never had a balance. He'd never had a collections notice. His credit was perfect. I sat there staring at the papers spread across my floor. My parents had set both of us up with credit cards. They'd paid off my brother's. They'd let mine go to collections. And when I'd needed a car loan and been denied, they'd never said a word. I wasn't just hurt. I was robbed. I called my mom. My hands were shaking. I said I needed to talk about something. She sighed like I was inconveniencing her. She said, "What now, Emma?" I asked her about the credit card. There was a long pause. Then she said, "That was years ago. Why are you bringing this up?" I said, "You destroyed my credit. You never told me." She said, "We were trying to help you build credit. It's not our fault you didn't keep track of it." I said, "I was 18. You told me you'd handle it." She said, "We did handle it. We paid it off, didn't we?" I said, "After it went to collections, after it ruined my credit for years." She got defensive. She said I was being ungrateful. She said they'd done me a favor by even setting it up. She said I was always looking for something to be upset about. I asked about my brother's card. I asked why his had been paid off immediately. She went quiet. Then she said, "Your brother needed help. You've always been independent. We didn't think you needed it." I hung up. I sat on my couch and cried for an hour, not because I was sad, because I was angry, because I finally understood. This wasn't neglect. This was a choice. They'd chosen him over me, again and again, and they'd convinced themselves it was justified. I opened my laptop. I started taking screenshots. I documented everything, every statement, every email, every piece of evidence. I wasn't backing down this time. A week later, I got a text from my cousin. She was getting married in 2 months. The invitation had just gone out. I checked my mail. Nothing. I texted her asking if she'd sent mine yet. She sent me a screenshot of the guest list. It said, Mr. and Mrs., last name, and son. Just my parents and my brother. I wasn't included. I asked her if that was a mistake. She said my mom had told her I was too busy with work to come. She said my mom had specifically asked not to send me an invitation because I'd just feel bad about missing it. I hadn't been asked. I'd been erased. I went to my messages and scrolled back. I noticed something. The family group chat I'd been part of for years was gone. I checked my archived chats. It wasn't there. I asked my brother when it had been deleted. He didn't respond for 2 days. Then he said, "We made a new one. I thought you were on it." He was lying. I could tell. I asked my aunt about upcoming family events. She mentioned 3 I'd never heard of. A barbecue, a birthday party, a holiday gathering. I hadn't been invited to any of them. My mom had been telling people I was too busy, too focused on work, too distant. She'd been building a narrative where I was the one pulling away, but I'd never been given the chance to show up. I sat in my apartment and felt the weight of it all. I wasn't just the disappointment, I was the scapegoat, the one they blamed, the one they excluded, the one they erased. And I'd spent years defending them, explaining their absences to friends, making excuses, protecting their image. I was done. Completely done. What they didn't know was I'd been preparing for this moment. 8 months earlier, I'd started seeing a therapist. Her name is Dr. Patel. I'd gone because I couldn't sleep, because I kept having panic attacks before family events, because I felt like I was losing my mind. Dr. Patel had listened. She'd asked questions. She'd helped me see the patterns. She'd told me to start writing things down, dates, events, conversations. I had an entire journal filled with evidence, not because I'd planned to use it, but because I needed to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. I also had a savings account my parents didn't know about. I'd opened it 2 years ago, and I'd been putting money in it every paycheck. I had $12,000 saved, enough to handle an emergency, enough to survive if I needed to cut ties completely. I'd also consulted with a lawyer about the credit card situation. His name is Mark. He's a family friend of one of my coworkers. He'd reviewed the documents and told me I had a case for identity theft. He said I could file a report if I wanted to. I hadn't decided yet, but I had the option. I also had Jade. Jade works with me at the hospital. She's a pediatric nurse, too. We've been on the same shift for 2 years. She knows everything. Every humiliation. Every disappointment. Every moment I'd been overlooked. She'd been there the night of the certification ceremony when I came to work with red eyes. She'd hugged me in the break room and told me my family didn't deserve me. She'd offered to come with me to any confrontation I needed to have. She'd said she'd sit there and be my witness, my support, my backup. I'd said I didn't need that, but now I was reconsidering. I texted her. I said I was ready to confront my parents. I asked if she'd come with me. She responded immediately, "I'll be there. Just tell me when." While I was planning, my parents were getting more confident. My mom had started posting on social media about how proud she was of my brother, how he was thriving, how blessed she was to have such an accomplished son. She'd posted a photo from the dinner, the one where my dad had humiliated me. The caption said, "Family dinner celebrating our son's promotion. So grateful for moments like these." I wasn't in the photo. My dad had commented, "Proud of you, son. You're going places." I saw the post 3 days after it went up. 53 people had liked it. My aunts, my cousins, family, friends, all of them congratulating my brother. No one had asked where I was. Then I got a text from my mom. It was short. "You owe your father an apology for walking out of dinner. He's hurt. Call him." I read it 5 times. I owed him an apology for being humiliated, for being called a waste of space, for leaving. That was it. That was the final straw. I texted back, "We need to have a family meeting this weekend at your house. I need to talk to both of you." My mom responded, "What's this about?" I said, "I'll explain when I get there." She didn't argue. She just sent me a time. Saturday at noon. I called Jade. I told her it was happening. She said she'd be ready. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I printed out the credit card statements. I printed out my credit report. I printed out the timeline of events I'd been documenting. I put everything in a folder. I practiced what I was going to say. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and rehearsed. I wanted to be calm. I wanted to be clear. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to cry. I just wanted them to hear me. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. My stomach was in knots. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if they denied everything? What if they turned it around on me? What if I walked in there and lost my nerve? But then I thought about that dinner, about my dad's words, about my mom's text, about being erased from family events and blamed for my own exclusion. I thought about the credit card they'd destroyed in my name, about the years of favoritism, about the lifetime of being invisible. And I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. Saturday morning, I got dressed. I wore jeans and a sweater. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. I picked up Jade at 10:30. She was waiting outside her apartment with a coffee for me. She said, "You ready?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm doing it anyway." We drove to my parents' house. It's a 20-minute drive. I listened to music the whole way. I didn't talk. Jade didn't push. She just sat next to me. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw my brother's car. I hadn't expected him. My mom must have told him to come. I looked at Jade. She said, "I'm right here." We walked up to the front door. I knocked. My mom opened it. She looked surprised to see Jade. She said, "I didn't know you were bringing someone." I said, "This is Jade. She's here for support." My mom looked uncomfortable but stepped aside. We walked in. My dad and brother were sitting in the living room. My dad was reading the newspaper. My brother was on his phone. They both looked up when we entered. My dad said, "What's this about, Emma?" I said, "I need to talk to all of you. It's important." My mom sat down on the couch. Jade and I sat across from them. I put the folder on the coffee table. My hands were shaking. I took a deep breath. I said, "I need to talk about what's been happening in this family, and I need you to listen." My dad folded his newspaper. My mom crossed her arms. My brother put his phone down. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first document, the timeline. I said, 3 months ago, I completed a trauma care certification. I invited you to the graduation. You canceled to go to a work dinner for someone who didn't even need you there. My mom said, we explained that. We had a commitment. I said, let me finish. She looked taken aback. I'd never spoken to her like that before. I continued. I said, 2 months ago, you invited me to a family dinner. You called it a reconciliation dinner. I thought you wanted to fix things, but instead, Dad stood up and told everyone I was a waste of space, that nursing was for people without ambition. My dad shifted. He said, I didn't mean it like that. I said, how did you mean it? He didn't answer. I pulled out the credit card statements. I said, when I was 18, you opened a credit card in my name. You told me you'd manage it. You didn't. You let it go to collections. You destroyed my credit for years, and then I found out you did the same thing for my brother, but you paid his off immediately. My mom's face went pale. My brother looked confused. He said, what are you talking about? I handed him the statements. He read them. His face changed. My dad said, that was a long time ago. I said, it affected my life. I couldn't get a car loan. I couldn't rent my first apartment without a cosigner, and you never told me why. My mom said, we were trying to help. I said, no, you weren't. You helped him. You let me struggle. I pulled out the next document, the list of family events. I said, for the last 6 months, I've been excluded from family gatherings. I wasn't invited to barbecues. I wasn't invited to birthday parties. My cousin's wedding invitation didn't include my name. And when I asked, you told people I was too busy. You told them I didn't want to come. You erased me. My mom started to cry. She said, you're attacking us. I said, I'm telling you the truth. My dad stood up. He said, this is ridiculous. You're keeping score. You're making everything about you. I stayed seated. I stayed calm. I said, this isn't about keeping score. This is about a lifetime of being treated like I don't matter, and I'm done pretending it's okay. My brother finally spoke. He said, I didn't know about most of this. I looked at him. I said, you were there, at the dinner. You heard what Dad said. You didn't say anything. He looked down. He said, I didn't know what to say. I said, you could have defended me. He didn't respond. I turned back to my parents. I pulled out the credit report. I said, I consulted with a lawyer. What you did with the credit card is identity theft. I could file charges if I wanted to. My mom gasped. My dad's face turned red. He said, you wouldn't? I said, I don't want to, but I need you to understand how serious this is. I need you to hear me. My dad sat back down. He was quiet. My mom was crying harder now. She said, we love you. We've always loved you. I said, then why don't I feel it? She didn't have an answer. I said, I came here because I need to set boundaries. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep hoping you'll see me. I can't keep getting hurt. My dad said, so what do you want? I said, I want you to acknowledge what you've done. I want you to stop excluding me and then blaming me for not being around. I want you to treat me like I matter. My mom said, we do treat you like you matter. I said, no, you don't. And if you can't see that, then I can't have you in my life. The room went silent. My dad stared at me. My mom sobbed into her hands. My brother looked between all of us. I stood up. I picked up the folder. I said, if you want a relationship with me, it has to be different. I'm not going to keep begging for your attention. I'm not going to keep defending you to other people. I deserve better than that. My dad said, you're overreacting. I looked at him. I said, I'm protecting myself. I turned to Jade. She stood up. We walked toward the door. My mom called after me. She said, Emma, wait. I stopped. I didn't turn around. She said, we didn't mean to hurt you. I said, but you did, and you have to decide if you're going to fix it. I walked out. Jade followed. We got in the car. I sat in the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the keys. Jade took them from me. She said, "I'll drive." I nodded. I couldn't speak. We pulled out of the driveway. I looked back at the house. I saw my mom standing in the doorway. She was crying. I turned away. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just felt empty and relieved and terrified. Jade drove us to her apartment. We sat on her couch. She made me tea. She didn't say anything. She just sat next to me. After an hour, I finally spoke. I said, "I don't know if that changed anything." She said, "Maybe it didn't, but you said what you needed to say, and that matters." I nodded. I believed her. Over the next few days, I waited for a response. My brother texted me. He said, "I'm sorry. I should have said something at dinner. I didn't realize how bad things were." I appreciated it, but I also knew he wasn't going to confront my parents. He'd apologized to me, but he wasn't going to risk his place in the family. My mom sent me a long text. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry I felt hurt. She said she didn't understand why I was so upset. She said she hoped I'd calm down and we could move past this. She didn't acknowledge anything I'd said. My dad didn't reach out at all. I blocked my parents on social media. I changed my emergency contacts at work to Jade. I updated my medical records. I made it clear. They were no longer my first call. I spent Thanksgiving with Jade and her family. They welcomed me in like I'd always been there. Jade's mom hugged me and said, "We're so glad you're here." I cried, not sad tears, grateful ones. I spent Christmas at the hospital. I volunteered to work so the nurses with kids could have the day off. I didn't mind. I had a chosen family now, my co-workers, Jade, Dr. Patel, people who actually showed up. My parents sent me a card. It said, "Merry Christmas. We miss you." I didn't respond. 1 year later, everything changed. I was promoted to charge nurse. It came with a pay raise and more responsibility. I was proud of myself, and I didn't feel the need to tell my parents. I bought my first apartment, a small one-bedroom with big windows and a balcony. I furnished it myself. I hung pictures of my chosen family on the walls. My parents weren't in any of them. I repaired my credit. It took time and effort, but I did it. I paid off old debts. I disputed the fraudulent accounts. I rebuilt. And I started a support group at the hospital for healthcare workers dealing with family estrangement. I wasn't the only one. There were so many of us. Nurses and doctors and techs who'd been hurt by the people who were supposed to love them. We met once a month. We shared our stories. We supported each other. And I realized my pain had purpose. It connected me to people who understood. My brother reached out occasionally. We had coffee a few times. He apologized again. He said he was working on setting his own boundaries. I believed him, but I also knew he wasn't ready to fully separate from our parents. That was okay. His journey wasn't mine. My parents tried a few more times. They sent cards. They texted on my birthday. But they never acknowledged what they'd done. They never apologized in a way that mattered. So I kept my distance. Not out of anger, out of peace. I realized something important. Loving my family and protecting myself aren't the same thing, and I choose myself. I don't wonder anymore if I'm enough. I don't wait for their approval. I don't hope they'll change. I just live my life, surrounded by people who see me, who celebrate me, who show up, and that's enough. If you've ever had to stand up to family betrayal, hit that subscribe button and tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to hear from you. You're not alone. Your story matters. Thank you for letting me share this with you. Your healing matters. I'll see you in the next one.